So I want to start with our MMSD vision. MMSD will be a learning community where all students are valued, challenged, and supported, inspired to reach their dreams. And I think tonight's conversation around building for the future is really going to help us realize this vision. Our mission as well, creating safe and inclusive schools, delivering high quality instruction, strengthening positive relationships, partnering with our families and the community to achieve student self-determination and educational excellence. And our guiding commitments, ensuring that we're leading with equity, fostering belonging, delivering meaningful learning, improving with purpose, and embracing our collective impact. And I think these guiding commitments are really going to be coming of good use as we go into the work of building for the future over the next years. So before I get started, I do want to acknowledge that one of our partners, Isaac Johnson, is also on the Zoom. Isaac Johnson works for MGT. MGT does this work across the nation. They've done hundreds of attendance area and boundary reviews, and I will start us off tonight, and then I will be turning it over to Isaac to walk through a lot of the data that you have in front of you and also what Dr. Gothard had alluded to. But before I do that, I want to remind the board and the community that building for the future really encompasses 3 parts. We are going to be talking about the boundary review and the attendance area work that is kind of short-term work over the next few years. The other part of building for the future is our enrollment strategy that is intimately connected and very important to the conversation tonight and the work over the next few years. And then the third part of building for the future will be an updated long-range facility plan that the board will receive in the fall. What I'm most excited about is that this conversation isn't just about talking about the day-to-day of what's happening in our district now. It is truly thinking about 20, 30 years from now of what we can plan for and what we are able to think about for the future of both the city, the school district, our students and families that haven't even yet come to MMSD. And while I recognize that sometimes it's hard to be able to think that far out, because there's a lot of unknowns, we are going to have to make some assumptions about what we believe to be true 20 to 30 years from now to really be planning for the future and to be setting up our school district for the future families and our students. So it's exciting work, and it can also feel a little abstract at sometimes. I also want to acknowledge that this work, along with the work that we're doing with MGT, is really possible because of our partnership with the City of Madison and the City Planning Division, as well as the City of Fitchburg that we've also been working closely with. A lot of the information you will see tonight is because they've been able to work with us to give us data that is critically important to these conversations. And the last thing I'll say before I jump into it is while there is no action for the board tonight, the work that you will see tonight and the work that we will be presenting both to the community and to the Board of Education over the next 9+ months will lead us to an action where the board will vote on a set of recommendations that we will be bringing forth next February. So again, tonight doesn't have actions, but there are contingencies for future action for the board next February. Okay, so let's dive into it. So what is our Building for the Future plan? We've shared this before, but when we set out to do this work, we really set out to look at our current attendance areas and our overall district boundaries. We wanted to understand where those complexities were and what we were learning about what families were experiencing with our current attendance areas. We also wanted to consider establishing attendance areas where we own land, both on the far east side by Sprecher and the far west side on Acacia Ridge. We also wanted to understand what was happening with our current programming and options, such as our dual language immersion programming, 4K, and what future programming might our families and our students be interested in. We really want to hear our families' values and understand what their educational experiences, desires are for their children. So one of the things that we are going to spend some time on tonight is looking at school capacity. And in order to understand school capacities, I thought it was important for the board and the community to understand how we at MMSD determine school capacities or utilization of our buildings. It's important to note that we have some buildings that you'll see tonight when Isaac shares some data that are what we would call underutilized or under capacity. And we have other school buildings that may be at capacity or over capacity. So I'm going to walk you through our formula because it'll be relevant to the data that you have in front of you. Our formula is based on a room-based capacity because we want to understand where our children experience their education on a day-to-day basis and room-to-room basis. So we look at our capacity by the number of rooms within a building and the number of rooms that are above 500 square feet or more. So a room that is 500 square feet or more and has well ventilation or instructional spaces is how we start to think about capacity. So that's the first thing. How many rooms do you have in your building that we define as well ventilated and are 500 square feet or more? And then what we do is we use our class size policy, right? Because our class size policy tells us the number of students per section that you should be having in a room. So we use the optimal level of our class size policy, which is usually that middle range. And we use that number times the number of instructional spaces. And we make adjustments such as if you are an AGR school or a non-AGR school at the to get to capacity. So for example, I'm just going to give a random example. We could say X school has capacity for 450 students. And we determine that based on the number of rooms that are 500 square feet or more times wherever that grade levels are in the optimum level of our class size policy. At elementary, we take out spaces such as music, gym, and art because those spaces are not used every day, all day. Children rotate in and out. And at the secondary level, we count those spaces because students are in those sections all day, every day. And so at elementary, we only focus on homerooms. At secondary, we focus on all classroom spaces that are that 500 square feet. You will see what this looks like in action when we get into the data, but I wanted to at least lead with the formula that is our district's definition of capacity and why this is important. When MGT will share some of the information soon, it changes district to district, right? Districts define their capacities differently. And so for us, it's important that we know we determined this definition, we create how we want to use our spaces. So we are the determining factor for some of what is overutilized or underutilized in our schools based on this definition. It will make sense when we dig into actual data. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to MGT. Could you put the slides up? We have two separate slides. Isaac, are you there and you can hear us?
I am here and I've been following along closely. Thank you for the introduction.
I'm going to turn it over to you, Isaac, and I will drive your slides for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for having me, everyone, tonight. I'm stepping in for Marcy, who has been working very closely with everyone on this project, and I've recently been added to the team, and then stepping in for her as she had a conflict tonight with her travel schedule. But more than happy to walk you through what we've done in terms of your enrollment forecasts and how this is going to tie into the redistricting process that you're looking at undertaking moving forward. If we advance the slides, we'll take a look at the flow chart here. That kind of explain our process and the factors that we go into when it comes to taking a look at what we expect to happen to what we call the resident student forecast for your population moving forward. And that's a key term to remember. I'll go back to it several times here, but we're actually projecting how many students we expect to be living within the district boundary and actually living within each one of your attendance areas. And we do some extra analysis as well to account for where kids are actually attending school as well. But when it comes to the basis of our forecast, we're taking a look at your historical student data. So we've asked the district to provide us with 4 years of student data directly from the student information system. So we have an understanding of the exact count of the number of children that are enrolled in the district, and more importantly, where they're living and what grades and attributes are associated with each one of those students. So we're able to upload that into the geographic information system to do some neat analysis that you're going to see the results of here moving forward. But that serves as the base. On top of that, we apply 3 different factors. We'll take a look at your birth factors, we'll take a look at mobility factors, and then we'll look at student generation rates as well. So how many students do we expect to come out of new housing based on what has come out of existing housing that has been more recently constructed? The birth factors help us understand what goes into incoming kindergarten classes. So if we see an increase in the number of children born, we expect that to lead to an increase in the number of kindergarten students we would introduce in each year of our forecast. Conversely, if we see a decline there, that would lead to a smaller number of incoming kindergarten classes into our projections. Our mobility factor tracks the rate of change at the neighborhood level as students progress from one grade to the next. And that gets combined with planned residential development that gets applied to the total number of units that we expect to be built across the district over the projection scope, which is 5 years for the work that we're doing for you. So we'll take the number of units, apply it towards the number of students that we expect that to be yielding, and introduce those students to come up with our overall student forecast. So that's what this looks like, and we'll walk you through each one of these factors as we advance the slides here to give you a look at what we talked about earlier, which was the beginning of this project begins with getting that student information system download. So we have an understanding of where all of your kids are living because we're able to plot them out by a process that we call geocoding, which you're seeing an example of here in the image number 2. And then we're able to do analysis at the study area level. So we've divided the district up into small little neighborhood blocks using natural boundaries, waterways, major roads, rail lines, any natural break that would serve as a neighborhood or a hazard that we don't want people to travel over, to come to an understanding of what we call study areas. And these are the basis of our projections and will be the basis of our redistricting plans moving forward. We go ahead and advance the slide once more. We'll show you what that looks like in terms of plotting your students out. We can see where density exists and where density lacks in different areas of the district. So we see in the central portion of the area here, we have a higher concentration of students, and there's a couple of pockets up there in the north. So we have an understanding of where density is spread out throughout the district, and that really helps us get into some additional analysis. If we move forward, we'll go ahead and take a look at one of the neat things that really helps guide the process. It really gives us an understanding as demographers coming into your community to help support you with this work, an understanding of the relationship between where kids are actually living versus where they're going to school. This is an abbreviated portion. There will be a full report that follows that you should be getting access to soon if you have not already. That will give you the full version of this. But what this does is it lays out where kids are actually attending, where they're actually living by attendance area, and it shows where they're actually going to school. So if we were to read across the columns here, across the row, we'll see that Black Hawk Middle School has 354 students living in its attendance area that are in grades 6 through 8. Of those, as we read across the columns here, across that row, you're going to see that 304 of those students, of that 354, actually attend Black Hawk Elementary School and live in the attendance area, right? So this is an important distinction to understand. As we continue to read across, we see where else do those 354 students actually go to school. 2 of them, we know that they go to Cherokee. As we read on across the rows, we can see that 19 go to Sherman Middle School, for example. So we can kind of get an understanding of how your district policies and school options allow people to attend schools that are their non-resident schools and understand how that happens. So there can be special programs that attract people there. We also take into account, if you look at the bottom line, students coming from outside of the district boundary attending one of your schools as well, to get a full understanding of where the capacity and policy and boundaries all meet up together.
Okay. Can I pause you for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Because the board has the full set of matrices in front of them printed out for elementary, middle, and high. So I just want to We can go into this after the presentation, but I just want to call your attention to what you see on the screen. You have in front of you for all of our elementary schools, the middle school that you see on the screen, and high. Looks like this document. And then the middle school you have, and you have the high school. The other thing that I just want to note is that what Isaac mentioned talks about students coming into our district, which is what we call open enrollment enterers, what are accounted for in these charts. What is not accounted for in these charts is our open enrollment leavers. And that's just an important distinction, knowing that we have 1,600 open enrollment leavers, but they are not accounted for in this data. And we could talk about that. Yeah, for sure. President Nichols.
Okay, can we pause just for
Sure.
like maybe just quick clarifying questions, not to disrupt the,
Yep.
just like on this data. So I have a clarifying question, but board member Mosner Feltham, do you want?
Those two,
Who
just
does?
all the online.
Okay,
just wanting to clarify, students living within the boundary are MMSD students living within the boundary. So open enroll leavers wouldn't be there, homeschoolers aren't there, students who choose private or parochial schools aren't there.
Correct, but
Okay,
open enrollment enterers, people that choose MMSD, are accounted for. At the bottom, second to bottom row where it says inter-district transfers. And then on the elementary, you will also have 4K accounted for,
I see.
both 4K community sites and 4K ons.
okay.
Keep with the clarifying questions. Isaac, if you're good with them, just because they're gonna orient themselves to the data in front of them.
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Isaac. Okay, I can go to board member Muldrow. Board member Muldrow, right now, if we can try to just do
Oh,
clarify.
my question was the exact same as board member Mosner Feltham's. I don't have a question anymore.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that first row that we just talked through for Blackhawk Middle School. So the 354 students that were counted within the boundary. What were the data sources for that to get that total count?
Great question. That was data that we asked for at the beginning of the process. That's supposed to represent October, the beginning of October of 2025. And so what we're projecting for you each year in our projections is a snapshot of the next 5 years of each of the next Octobers moving forward for the next 5 years.
So it's our third Friday count of any student that is enrolled in MMSD on third Friday count.
Okay,
And then we look at their addresses of their attendance area. And then we look at the school that they're actually attending.
okay, super helpful. Okay, so there are 354 students based on their physical address
Pointed to.
who are pointed to Blackhawk Middle School.
Correct.
And then following along that row, we see 304 of those students actually go to the middle school that they're pointed to. And then there are two students who whose families selected Cherokee, one who goes to Gillespie, 9 who are going to O'Keefe, 8 who are going to Senate. And that's where, to Isaac's point, our own policies around internal transfers
And dual language immersion.
and dual language immersion.
And it's
Oh,
the
thank you.
Spanish dual language immersion middle school in that area, so you make assumptions that probably those 19 students that are going to Sherman are due to our own programs and policies, they're accessing Spanish dual language immersion. And then you'll see off in the white columns are Badger Rock and
Yep.
Wright and Spring Harbor. Remember Badger Rock Charter, Spring Harbor and Wright are magnets, so
Yes.
different policies and processes for
Mhm.
schools.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. I appreciate all the questions, and that doesn't surprise me. It's the first data piece that we're showing you, and it's very important to the work that we're doing forward. So keep your questions coming as they come up.
I'm sorry, Isaac, I just want to see if there's other clarifying questions before we move forward.
Okay, I have one last clarifying.
For
question.
sure.
Thank you. So for the inter-district transfers, those are families who are choosing to send their children to MMSD.
Yes.
And so like in the middle school chart, I'm seeing 85 middle school scholars are in MMSD that would normally not be MMSD students. Is that correct? Based on their home addresses, or I might be too in the weeds.
That's
No.
correct. You're perfect. You're spot on. Those are students that are coming from outside of the district boundary based upon their address.
Okay, and then what we see across that row is all of the different middle schools that those 85 students are attending, including our magnet and charter schools. Okay,
And that's a really important number, because remember, students are and families are open enrolling into our district. So it's
correct.
important for us to understand how many are and where they're choosing to open enroll to. So that's just, to me, a really important data point in terms of that we continue to understand what families are choosing and why.
Yes. Okay, great. I feel oriented to the data.
Wonderful.
Thank you, President. Okay, Isaac, want me to go to the next slide?
One more thing before we move on from the slide. The last point I want to point out here is that the total enrollment is the number that everyone is used to seeing. When we look at your schools, typically through spreadsheets, how many kids are actually attending each one of your schools. And that's what you're seeing listed in each column as you read across those columns there. The number that you're going to see in all of the data that we supply you with is going to be the count of students living within the boundary, and that third column there is the important one to look at. So just understand that we're looking at resident totals because we want to make sure that we get capacity to where the students actually are to help you make informed decisions about where to locate special programs and non-boundary school activities throughout the district. We'll revisit that a little bit later on, but that's what we're trying to display here. And I want to make sure that everyone leaves this slide with that understanding before we move to the next one. So let's do that now. Let's go ahead and advance to the next slide. And I
Well,
appreciate
Isaac, will you go through, because you didn't talk about the vertical data, and I think it's
Right.
the board to understand vertical data, which is where the kids are when they're coming into that school.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I did overlook that. Let's take a look at the Black Hawk column, where we see it starts with 304 students, right? Those are the students that we know are actually attending Black Hawk Middle School. As I read on down the line, I see that I have 1 at Cherokee, I have 12 at Sherman, at Whitehorse, I have 6, and the total resident students is 325. If I bring in the interdistrict transfers, the kids that are coming from outside of your district boundary, that adds 4 more for a total enrollment at Black Hawk Middle School of 329 students. So that's how we read down each one of the columns. So you get an understanding of where all the students are actually going to school as you read across the rows based on where their resident boundary is. And we see where they're actually going to school as you read on down the actual columns. So thank you.
Horizontal students are leaving and going to other schools. Vertical are students that are assigned to a different school and coming in.
Yeah,
And for Blackhawk, some of those students might be our Hmong bilingual program coming to Blackhawk, as an example. Sorry, Isaac, I just wanted to add that piece.
Absolutely. No, it needed to be pointed out. Thank you.
right. So like, when we go down the column, looking just at Black Hawk, you can see that there are 12 students who live in the Sherman area, but their families are choosing to have to go to Black Hawk.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Correct. Okay, I'll advance to the next slide.
Okay, so with that understanding, the next thing we do is actually get into the actual forecast itself. And we'll talk about the individual factors on the next slide. Here, you're going to see our birth rate table, which gives us an understanding of the number of children that were born and the zip codes that make up the district boundary. And then we compare and contrast that to how many students actually showed up in kindergarten 5 years later to get an understanding of what that ratio looks like. And if we see an increase or a decrease from our base year, which is going to be 2020, that is when that's the year that produced your current kindergarten class, right? That number of students is 1,755 students, and that came out of birth totals that were 3,415. So if I'm looking at the 2020 column here, that's what you're going to see in terms of our base year. And what we do is we compare that to each year prior to get an understanding of what we expect to happen moving forward. So if we see a decrease in the total number of births for the following year, we expect that to lead to a smaller incoming kindergarten class the next year. And that's what we're seeing here. We see your birth rates going from, or birth totals going from 3,589 in 2017. And that has been on a downward trend mostly through 2020, which gives our current kindergarten class. So it's down from 3,589 students in 2017, and it has fallen to 3,415 total births by the time we got to 2020. That trend is going to cause us to introduce smaller incoming kindergarten classes throughout the length of the projections based upon that falling ratio. It's important to understand that this is not unique to just your district. This is your data, but the trend isn't unique just to the Madison area. This is something that we see across the country in a lot of the work that we do, where people are just having fewer children, they're having later in life, and they just aren't having as many based on a number of factors that we can all talk about, whether it's affordability, family planning, a number of things go into that calculation there. The bottom line is there are more students or children born in the area that actually show up in your schools 5 years later. And that's a result of maybe people moved before they get to kindergarten. And then there's also the idea out there that there may be people pursuing other educational opportunities in the areas where, whether that be a private school or charter school or some other version of that moving forward. And that's something that I know a lot of work is being done to try to bring in more of those students moving forward. So that's what you're seeing there displayed in that resident percentage to birth K line, that trend line showing us how much is typically shows up the following year. And that sits right around 50 to 51% throughout the life of our projections here. So that's an important factor to look at as we move through this. If we advance the slides, we'll talk about the next one. And this is a unique one to the
Isaac,
work.
can I say one thing before I advance the slide? I just want
Please
to
do.
call out, this is where the intersection of the attendance area review and our enrollment strategy are really critical in terms of better understanding what families are choosing for their school for kids and where we have opportunities both with 4K as well as kindergarten as part of our enrollment strategy. Thank you, Isaac.
I'm sorry, I know, can I just ask one clarifying question about this data?
Of course.
And I'm trying to be also, just for fellow colleagues, I know that we've got a lot to do tonight, so I'll try not to do this after every slide. I am wondering, with the expansion of 4K, has there been analysis of 4K attendance? I know that we had talked about this, like there was 4K and then looking at how many of them actually become our kindergartners, but is there anything, is there other data that shows us that that birth rate data to 4K and then 4K into our kindergarten class? And maybe that might be too in the weeds. I'm just curious.
We take a very similar approach to calculating 4K as well. It's taking a look at this ratio. We just changed the year. So we would start with data from 2021, which will give us our 4K student population. So that ratio gets applied to 4K. And then we take what you're seeing here for kindergarten using 2020 as our base year, which gave us our current kindergarten class.
We do have a higher percentage of 4K students who enroll in kindergarten than the 51% that you see here.
Okay.
So one of the things that our enrollment team then is working towards is how can we expand the number of 4K seats we afford to our community?
Got it, because
Knowing that
those
we have-
that come
Correct.
have a higher likelihood to also stay with our garden.
80% persistence, the number of our
Right,
4K students
Okay,
that then stay for kindergarten is 80%. So the more we can think about expansion of full day 4K and getting more 4K students to join MMSD 4K, more likely that we'll continue to grow our kindergarten because of that 80% persistent rate. So it is part of what we're learning from MGT, and it is definitely part of the intersection with our enrollment strategy,
Okay, great.
80% persistence.
All right, thank you for that. Board Member Mosner Feltham?
Thank you. Oh gosh, I don't want. My cell phone is listening. Can I ask about the birth rate, if that is, all the babies born in our local hospitals, or if that's, babies born to parents who live in Madison?
Only MMSD zip codes in our attendance area, but I'll let Isaac talk about it more formally.
Yeah. That's correct. We take the zip codes where the majority of that zip code fits within the district boundary, and those are included in our study here.
Got it, thank you.
Just to give you a difference, I think Meriter alone celebrated more than 5,000 births this year. So it's here, only 3,400 or so are MMSD.
In our zip.
Okay.
And it's worth noting out that these trends don't change quickly over time in terms of the actual birth rate trend, how many total students or children are born from year to year, and they don't vary by zip code to zip code. This is a very large national type trend that takes place. So that's why we study that ratio, and we break it down by zip code as best we can, because that's how it's reported, and try to keep it local to what actually fits within the district boundary. But there isn't much variance from zip code to zip code.
President Nichols, are we good to go to the next?
Yes, I believe so. Thank you.
Okay.
Wonderful. This is an important slide that we're looking at right now because this factor helps really drive our projections. What we're taking a look at here is how we calculate mobility. If you're familiar with cohort survival rates, this is very similar, where we're taking a look at how many students will advance from one grade to the next moving forward. So how many kids made it from kindergarten to first grade? How many kids showed up from first grade to second grade each year that we have student data for? What makes our approach unique is that we're taking a look at 4 years of student data representing the 3 years of change, right? So we take a look at your data from 25, 24, 23, and 22, and those 3 years of change that are in between those 4 years of student data. And we actually have geocoded all of your students. So rather than just doing it at a district-wide level, we've gone at the attendance area level, at your elementary school attendance level, to calculate a mobility factor for each one of your attendance areas. So we're taking a look at how many kids live in the Chavez attendance area and how many kindergartners showed up and became first graders the following year. Did we see an increase or a decrease historically over those 4 years of change? Here we see that increase was about 3%. So we have a ratio of 1.03. So we saw a 3% jump in the number of kindergartners that showed up the following year and became first graders, historically averaging that out over 4 years of student data, 3 years of change. So where you see blue numbers, you're seeing an increase. Where you're seeing yellow numbers, you're seeing a drop or a decrease. What's happening behind each one of these is people moving into your existing housing stock or people leaving your existing housing stock, or people showing up and enrolling in one of your schools that are living in a home that we can account for, or choosing to go elsewhere. There's a number of factors that are going into this, and this is a catch-all to understand what the net result is. It doesn't tell us how much of that trend is attributed to each one of those things that could be occurring, but it gives us a net result that we have to be aware of. And we can see that different areas of the district are experiencing different trends. For example, we talked about Chavez Elementary School, that attendance area sees an increase at kindergarten and first grade, then it starts to see a little bit of a drop off until we get up to high school again, where it starts to pick up again as we go from 8th to 9th, 9th to 10th, 10th to 11th, and so on and so forth. If we were to compare that to another one where we see some more blue numbers, for example, the Franklin Randall attendance area, we combine those two schools into one attendance area for the purposes of our analysis. We see an increasing trend for the most part all the way through 7th grade, and then it picks back up again in 8th and 9th and 10th grade as we move forward through the projections then. So this shows that there are different factors, different trends taking place in different areas of your district, and we are able to account for that in our projections as well. I want to advance to the next slide. It's going to be similar data, but it just shows you that we're looking at the extension of the rest of the district. We've done this for each one of your attendance areas. And so you're seeing that here on the next slide where we show you that analysis. Typically what we see.
Isaac, for 1 second, can I just pause and orient them since I'm in person? I stood up and I'm gonna just show an orientation and then I'm gonna let you continue so that they all understand how to read this since you have every school showing up. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Isaac. So I'm gonna take Henderson, and Isaac, just so you know, I'm gonna take Henderson since it's at the top. What you
Perfect.
see first is we only see elementary schools because we track all the way through 12th grade. So within here, it shows you their middle school feeder and their high school feeder. So for every elementary, you'll see what happens all the way through 12th grade.
Okay.
Okay. Got that so far? Okay. So then what you'll see, how I've talked to people about this, I say yellow is negative, blue is positive in simple terms, right? If you're seeing anything in yellow, it means we're losing students. If you're seeing anything in blue, we're gaining students. And so this is year to year transition. So you follow cohorts of students, for example, and as Isaac said, we looked at 4 years worth of data. So Henderson, from kindergarten to 1st grade, they see a decline in students. So that's either families are choosing to leave to go somewhere else, families move, mobility, etc. 1st to 2nd, we're seeing a loss as well. 2nd to 3rd, we're seeing a loss. All of a sudden, something's happening from 3rd to 4th grade at Henderson, where we're seeing an increase in our student enrollment in the number of students in 4th grade. So for every 100 students, now we're seeing 102 students from 3rd to 4th grade. And so on. What you will notice that is a district trend, and then I'm going to stop because Isaac's the expert, is that from 5 to 6 on both charts, for the majority of our schools, we see a decrease or a decline in student enrollment. So something's happening in transitions from elementary school to middle school.
And
One highlight that I want to show you is we also have inward mobility happening at a really fascinating approach at Lakeview, where you see every year they're increasing the number of students, right? Their enrollment is going up in transition grades. The other thing to note is that for the most part, when you start to look at 8 to 9, you see an increase. So we're having this dip of students leaving for middle school, and then we're getting not all, but some of those students back. So that's just how you read the chart. And sorry, Isaac, they don't have this one in front of them, so I was trying to walk them through the screen.
No, that's absolutely fine. I appreciate you doing that.
Back to you.
Important to get an understanding of that as well. You did a great job explaining it. Typically what we see is an increase from K to 1 with districts that we work throughout the country. I saw a lot of nodding heads when we talked about the drop off at the middle school grades. As someone that is getting ready to have middle school age children, there's a lot of debate within our household about what to do there. And I know that a lot of people start to show up again when they get to the high schools to take advantage of your extracurricular activities the high school programs offer. And so we typically see an increase as people show up from 8th to 9th grade. And then depending on graduation rates, we typically see different changes throughout the country, depending on how that is working, and see some healthy trends for your district here moving forward. Definitely a big increase, 11 to 12. That might be different programs that you're doing for your seniors there as well. So that's what we're capturing. The bottom line is we're doing this for each one of your elementary attendance areas to get an understanding of what trends may be occurring within different pockets of your district, which is why we do this residence-based approach once again, to get an understanding of what's happening at the neighborhood level as close as we can get.
Isaac, can we pause here for clarifying questions as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I have one clarifying question. Thank you for taking the time to kind of further explain this. So when I look at all of the in the blue, where there's a cohort of students who make that transition from 11th to 12th. It looks as though folks are in kind of that final year, and getting ready to graduate. And so I would that's how I'm seeing that, like that there's more blue because students are going from 11th to hopefully their final year of high school. But when I look at the preceding year of sophomore year to junior year, I can see that there's some yellow. And what I am wondering is, have you all also looked at mobility as students who may be choosing some of our alternative high schools that weren't originally routed in the cohort, like in a feeder pattern? Like, do we know if any of that mobility from 10th grade to 11th grade includes some of the other options we provide or not?
It will if they are still within MMSD options, because our data counts for those students, right? Because if it's OFS and if it's our students that are at OFS, they're still rostered and they're still accounted for into our data with the data that we provided to MGT. Now, if they chose something outside of the district and it's not where we are still counting for the MMSD students, then that might.
Okay,
The other thing for the 11th to 12th is our 18 and year and plus, and our 5th year students, and so you see some students go up based
Got
on
it, okay.
cohorts growing because of that. But Isaac, I don't know if there's anything else you would add to that or anything, or maybe if I didn't say anything.
No, that was spot on. There is there's different programs that you can offer seniors that will show up, and you're absolutely right. If they're your schools, it's accounted for here. What would show up in yellow is if they're choosing a school that is not under the umbrella of Metro Madison.
We have a couple more clarifying questions.
I'll go with board member Vandermeulen and then board member Mosner-Feltham.
Now I know you said that these are students that have, especially 4K, we keep a large number, but some leave. How do we know which are the students we're getting back and which are new students? Do we separate them out? How do we tell which ones we're retaining?
Were you able to hear that question, Isaac? How do you distinguish the students that were once in MMSD versus new students coming to MMSD? Is that what?
We would have to get into the individual student records to come up with that research for you. That's something that can be done. But what you're seeing here is the net result and net totals of everything that's happening all at once here.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I didn't know if it was too in the weeds or not, so I thought I should ask.
I think we have one more.
I have one clarifying question. For each number relates back to that 100 number at kindergarten, or it's related to the year before?
The ratio gets applied to the current grade. So K-1 would be what we apply to first grade. 1 to 2 is what we apply to second grade, 2nd to 3rd, so on and so forth, is what we're applying that to. So it's the ratio that gets applied. In fact, if we go back a couple of slides, we actually illustrate that there. So if we go back one more slide, you can see that example here. So if we take a look at the previous slide, there we go. We can see that if we have 100 kindergarten students and we apply the mobility rate of 1.04, that's going to give us 104 first grade students the following year in our projection.
And then in the 1st to 2nd grade, we're gonna take that 104 and multiply it by 1.03?
We're going to take the 1.03. Yes, exactly. You're right. That's exactly what we're doing.
Understood. So for schools that are like, okay, so like if I look at Emerson, that's my kid's school. Between kindergarten and 1st, you're losing some from 1st and 2nd, but then it goes back up from 2nd to 3rd. But it's still in the yellow. Can you help me understand? Like, because we're adding students, right?
Think of them as percentage decline. So if you just subtract from 100, think of them as percentage declines or increases that we're going to apply to the class cohort that shows up that year of the projection.
So
So-
of the second graders that are there,
Mhm.
we see 93% of them come back the following year in that particular one.
Correct.
Great, I appreciate the clarification, thank you.
Any other clarifying questions before we move to the next data set? And again, this is giving you a snapshot of lots of different data that goes into this. Yep.
I know they don't separate, but can they, in the future, can we find a way to find out which students are new and which are else are our own, so that way we can focus on what retention strategies really are attracting new students versus the ones we're getting back, 'cause then we can focus on what new programs we need to attract more people.
Let me follow up and we'll get back to the board on that. Thank you.
Cool.
Anything? Oh,
Is Madison Promise included in here?
yes.
I'm sorry, what was
The question is Madison Promise included here? And yeah, Madison Promise would be included, but it would be based on their home school that they are assigned to, since Madison Promise is not an attendance area. So the students that attend Madison Promise are accounted for based on their home attendance area.
How are they identified in here? I guess it's like. They're just part of the count in the end.
Correct, and then you'll see, just like, for example, when you saw the slide before where we talked about where students are going to, and sometimes students choose to go to Badger Rock or choose to go somewhere else. But because Madison Promise is not a school, they show up in their assigned home school attendance area. Students are basically double enrolled in the district, so they're still assigned to their home school, and then they're assigned secondarily to Madison Promise as a program.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I took that one because that's probably about program is our school.
Yes.
Not a problem.
My hand up.
Your hand is up. I'm
Oh, sorry.
President Nichols, are we ready to move on?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, all right, Isaac, anything else on this slide, or you want me to go to the next slide?
I think we're ready to go to slide 10 here.
Thank you.
So we talked about residential development, and we approach that by two ways. First, we'll go out and we'll see where all the development is taking place. That'll be our next slide. But more importantly, is to take a look at how many children have come out of the most recently constructed homes throughout the district, is what we're going to apply to the number of units that we're going to add to our forecast. So what we've done is we've gone through and we've looked at homes that have been built over the last 10 years to get a good sample size of how many students of each housing type we expect to be built in the future, and figure out what that ratio is. So you're seeing the results of that analysis. So remember, we're able to go in and mark with precision where all of your students are actually living, right? We know what units they're actually coming from because we're able to overlay that to come up with an exact count of students that are coming out of the existing housing stock. And so we limit that study to units that have been constructed over the last 10 years. And we break it down by the four housing types that you're seeing here: single family detached, single family attached, apartments, and then affordable units. So we have those four different classifications that we're applying yield factors to. And you'll see that the ratios are listed here as well. So if we skip right down to the bottom, which the one that matters is the actual total here, we can see that we have a ratio of 0.203 for single family detached homes. What that means is that for every 100 new single family homes that are expected to be constructed, we're going to add about 20 students to the projections for that year. Okay. So we'll take 100 homes to generate 20 students for K through 12. For single family attached, that ratio falls to 12 or 0.125. It falls further for apartments, dramatically so, where we're getting just one student for every 100 apartment units that are constructed. And then for affordable, we see that it increases to 0.38. So we're getting 38 students for every 100 affordable units that is constructed throughout the district. These ratios are important because this really helps us understand how many kids we expect to actually come out of the number of total units that are going to be constructed throughout the district moving forward. All right. So let's move to the next slide and we can show you what we're going to apply these ratios to. We took great care in speaking to planners, developers, checking records, looking at permits pulled, and speaking with planners to get an understanding of where we expect construction to take place and what type of units were going to take place. And while we look at there are 120 active projects that are currently planned, and by current, we did have a cutoff date of January of 2026, the beginning of January 2026, as where we stopped our analysis. There may be projects that have been added since then, but it's important to understand we're capturing a snapshot. We have to have a cutoff point at some point there. And so that's why we make sure that we always recommend that districts constantly revisit these projections to make sure they're capturing the most recent information. But to move forward, we accounted for 120 projects. That amounts to 12,214 units that are in our forecast. And we're going to apply those ratios by housing type that you saw. So about 24% of the new housing will be within the Franklin Randall Elementary attendance area. And then about 81% of all of the units are apartments. But that's really important. I want to go back just to make a point of emphasis here. 81%, if we go back to the previous slide here, 81% of your units are apartments. And we know that the apartments are the lowest yielding housing type that is being constructed. Okay. This also backs up some of the other information I shared with you earlier about falling birth rates. There are just fewer children in the area to occupy some of these new homes. And this is going to validate some of the data we're going to share with you as far as the trend that we're projecting moving forward. So that's an important thing that I always like to point out. Yield factors are not what they have been historically. And so while we see there is a significant amount, we have to keep into perspective the unit type and what has come out of those historically. And the analogy, the thing I like to point out when I talk about this is think about the types of units that are being built, apartments, and think about what those look like oftentimes too, right? So a popular trend that we're seeing across the country is mixed retail, where you have apartments on top of coffee shops and gyms and different things and amenities like that. But they're not surrounded by parks and jungle gyms and things that attract families to want to have children being there as well. And so that's just where we are as a market right now with 81% of those apartments being there. And we just see that as a low yielding housing type. However, it'll be important to watch how many affordable homes are being built, is that is something that could change moving forward for you, that has the potential to generate almost twice as many students as the next popular one or most highest yielding one, which would be single family detached homes. So keep an eye on those ratios as your community continues to change moving forward. There are other opportunities to retain students and to see an influx of students into the district moving forward. So that's how we go about capturing the different factors. We've got it mapped out here. We can see that it's kind of spread throughout the district here in different pockets. We're kind of breaking it down by region for you on the next slide. If we just pan to the west of your district and then move to the central and then move out to the further east to give you a little bit more detail. So if you're eyeing a specific project, and once again, there's a full accounting of this in our report as well that breaks it down by project, the number of units that are going into each study area, and the number of units that are going into each one of your attendance area as well to give you an understanding of what that looks like. We've also graphed it out here on slide 13. If we skip ahead one more slide.
Can I make one clarifying, just so it's important for the public too? We stopped the data in December, so not January. And so just so as people are looking, the last data pull for developments was early December. I just wanted to make that point for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. The resident development by elementary and middle school attendance area chart is what you're seeing here. So we give you an understanding of where all of the development is taking place. We can see that if we look at it by middle school attendance area, we see that Hamilton Middle School has the majority of the development. Once again, we have to keep in mind the ratios that are applied to the total number of units, right? We have more apartments being constructed throughout the district, but it's also the lowest housing type in terms of student generation rates that are expected to occur across the district as well. And you get a breakdown by elementary attendance area as well. So how your feeders fit into that is what we're accounting for here on this chart to give an understanding of where the development is most concentrated. So that leads us to finally our district forecast. Okay. What you're going to see is a breakdown of what we're looking at historically on the next slide, where we stand currently, and then what we have actually as forecasted as well. So you see that the first columns there are going to be what has happened historically, where we see the total number of students that went into that mobility factor, right? And then we advance further to where we are today on our current snapshot, which is 2025, from that count day in October. And then we have projected the next 5 years for you moving forward. The most important thing to look at in terms of how this breaks down is the different ways that we talked about our factors, right? You can see that the red line here, the stair step red line that goes down here, just shows you how students progress from one grade to the next and how mobility is affecting your projections, right? So district-wide, we see kind of this declining trend until we get to the high school grades before it starts to pick back up again. We also see the impact from housing is going to happen each year of the forecast, depending on when we expect those projects to come online and how quickly we expect them to become occupied. There's a chart that breaks that down in the report as far as the development schedule or the occupancy schedule as well. And we apply that ratio of student generation rates against that. And so we're adding students each year of our projections as well. And then we also have this green shaded area, probably will animate if you hit the button again, where we look at what's happening in terms of your kindergarten students. That is a direct result of the birth rate chart that we showed you before of how we're introducing smaller incoming kindergarten classes based on that following ratio going back to data from 2020. So what we're looking at as a whole is some decline over the next 5 years. But that is based upon where we know things currently stand. And in terms of mobility, in terms of what's happening with your housing development and how we expect that to come online, and your birth rates. There are different things that can affect this as well. And I know Cindy is tuned into what those things are. And before I show you the next few slides here, I'm just going to give her an opportunity to talk to you about what that is and how that may counterbalance some of the decline that you're seeing here over the next 5 years and what can happen there. But we base our work based upon what has happened currently, but we don't dismiss what can happen programmatically that can counterbalance that.
Thank you, Isaac. So just to that point, the whole reason why the Building for the Future plan not only includes the data that we're looking at here in our attendance areas, but an enrollment strategy. So if we do nothing, right, if we kind of stay status quo, as Isaac pointed out, the data shows that there is a slight decline. So the enrollment strategy and the opportunities that we have around expansion of 4K, understanding what families are currently choosing for schooling starting at kindergarten, what we're learning about transitions at the middle school level, and the types of programming and or school options that families are interested in, such as families that are open and rolling out, are where opportunities are really here for us as a district to increase enrollment. The students and families live within the attendance areas. It's upon us to start to think about that enrollment strategy more proactively over the next 5 to 10 years in order to increase enrollment. And President Nichols has a question, so I'm gonna pause, Isaac. President Nichols.
Yeah, just really quickly, just so I'm understanding what I'm seeing on this screen in comparison to the attendance matrix. So first of all, I appreciate that forecasting is you're bringing in a variety of variables and applying ratios and so I understand there's some nuance to this, but on this screen right now, I'm just focused on middle school. So kind of at the bottom of the screen where you show the grade bands of 6th through 8th.
Mhm.
In 2025, you show 5,017 students with a projection in 2026 of that going up just a little bit to 5,033. it a little bit up again in 2027 and then down again in the following year. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, now, I also have the other sheet that was printed to us that we looked at earlier. And right now, that sheet is saying that our third Friday count in the fall of 2025 has a total middle school enrollment of 5,102.
Because it
Residents.
it includes the the open enrollment.
Correct.
enters in there. Yeah.
Right, and then before those open enrollers, it was 5,017. So this is that would match the current 2025. And then you're saying you've applied all the other things about mobility, about cohort change, about all the things, and that's what we're seeing as the projections moving forward. Okay, thank you.
Your question is perfectly timed because it leads us to talking about where we're going next with the next slide. Because what you're looking at here is the resident totals, and the totals that you just pulled were from this chart here, which factor in actual enrollment. And that's where you see here the total students. We've got a number of students that are not included in your forecast. Those are students that we weren't able to match for whatever reason. Those are students that actually are living outside of the district boundary that we talked about. So that's where that 85 number is coming from. And when it comes to your middle school students that are not included in the forecast, because we're projecting your resident student population. We're not projecting enrollment, we're projecting how many kids are going to be living in the district boundary and where we expect them to be living. Because policy can change what your actual enrollment looks like. And we want to help provide you with data to make informed decisions about where to place special programs and how you can shape policy based on where you have capacity for it and where you do not have capacity based on how your boundaries currently look. And we can draw them accordingly to account for that.
I think that's really important. Can you just restate that again? Because I think that's gonna get into a lot of the discussion, not just today, but as over the next year.
Absolutely. So what President Nichols was pointing out was the difference that she saw versus the resident student population versus the total enrollment. And she was right to do that. And it highlights our point of making sure that we're projecting by residents, the total number of kids living in your attendance areas. So that way we can assign capacity to where the students actually are to help you make informed decisions about where we need to place special programs and where we have capacity to locate those programs to make sure that we're not overloading your schools or underutilizing schools based on where those programs are actually located. So that's done efficiently.
Which gets back to the capacity definition at the beginning of how we define capacity and where students and families currently live and where they're situated to how our school attendance areas are that can impact underutilization or overcapacity. So thank you for that, Isaac. Are there other clarifying questions on this slide, President Nichols, before we continue?
I don't see any other hands raised.
Do you want me to go to the next slide or stay on this slide, Isaac?
We can go to the next slide at this point. What you're seeing here is just a bar graph representation of where the trend has been historically stable, and it starts to taper off slightly moving forward. But Sydney mentioned the different initiatives that are taking place to counterbalance that. And it was right to point out where those opportunities are with 4K, and especially with middle school. And that really stands out when you take a look at where your students are distributed, excuse me, across your grades, 4K to 12, and you see your smallest class sizes being the 4K class size, as well as your middle school grades are currently where your smallest class sizes exist. So it would make sense that if there are policy decisions or initiatives to take place to counterbalance that, it could help offset some of what you're seeing here as the slight decline over the next 5 years going through 2030. I'd also like to point out that we've been talking about the residence-based approach. We're projecting where your students are actually going to be living. So on the next slide, you're going to see how we've done that at the study area level. And this is important because as we get into changing school assignments based upon boundaries, these will be the building blocks for that. And I want everyone to understand that we've actually gone into detail of projecting each one of these little polygons that you're seeing here. And there's different trends that are occurring in different areas of your district and different neighborhoods that make it up. The areas in green are where you're seeing increases. The areas in orange and red are where we're going to see decreases moving forward. And that's just a function of a lot of the factors that we talked about, obviously, but mainly, more importantly, the current class sizes and how they're distributed across grades 4K through 12. If you have larger class sizes graduating out, being replaced by smaller incoming kindergarten classes, that neighborhood is likely set up to see decline. There are other neighborhoods where that would be the opposite, and we have a concentration of development where that will cause it to grow as well. And so the reason we want to do this by residents is because we can't wash out the trends by looking at it district-wide or looking at it through a spreadsheet. We want to make sure we're looking at what's happening at the ground level in each one of your neighborhoods. And so you have that level of detail that the teams are going to be looking at as they go through these scenarios and take a look at that. So there'll be a projection behind each one of them that shows what the attendance area would look like today versus what we expect to be projected to hold in the future. And our software allows us to take that approach and to support you in that respect. I'd like to go to the next slide to highlight something else that we just mentioned, and the importance of looking at your capacities and looking at the resident student forecast as well. The big blue graph that you're seeing, or bar that you're seeing in this chart here, is the actual capacity of that particular elementary school attendance area that we're looking at, their actual facility itself. We expect that be able to house, for like Stevens Elementary School, 546 students is the capacity that was given to MGT by the district to do our analysis with. And we've projected out what we expect the resident student population to be. So we can see that there's a big gap between the resident student population that lives within the Stevens Elementary attendance area and what we expect to actually be living there moving forward. And we've broken it down into 5-year intervals or into intervals here. I'm sorry, I apologize for that. I shouldn't say 2035. It should be 2025, 2027, and 2030. I'll make sure that change gets in there for you. I apologize for the oversight there. But the bottom line is what we're projecting for you here shows that there is adequate capacity at Stevens Elementary's current attendance area, right? So we can add students to that. Let's take a look at the opposite situation here. If we look at Thoreau Elementary School, where we're over capacity in terms of the resident student population versus the capacity that is there. Keep in mind, once again, the totals you're looking at are resident totals, kids living in that attendance area, not what's actually going to school there. We won't dismiss that. We do take that into account, and you saw that level of detail in the matrices that you're looking at. So that will support our work as well as we make sure that we have that accounted for moving forward. But this helps guide us to where to look and where the district needs to begin looking at that analysis in more detail to start solving capacity issues that may exist in different areas of the district, and which areas can be called upon to help provide relief to other ones as well. So that's really going to be an important thing that we'll look at moving forward. The next slide will show you some of the other attendance areas as well. And this is where you look at the enrollment versus capacity, right? So we talked about what it looks like by residents, but what does it look like in terms of enrollment? So we saw on the previous slide that Thoreau Elementary School was over capacity in terms of this resident student population. So if everyone wanted to go to school there that lives within an attendance area, you wouldn't have room for them based upon the current capacity. Policies have been changed and such that allows the enrollment to be different as well. And here we've taken into account what we expect the enrollment to be at the schools in this projection here. So I want you to know that we're taking a look at both angles, but the resident-based approach helps us know where to look first. And then we complement that analysis by taking a look at what's happening at the enrollment level as well.
Isaac, can I just pause here for a second? I want to go back and I just want to restate and give everyone a minute to orient themselves to this. So again, a sample of the current state and future state of schools based on our definition of capacity, and for students that are pointed to those schools based on attendance areas is this slide. And then this slide allows for where our policies and our programs come into play that changes our schools' capacities based on internal transfer opportunities, open enrollment in dual language immersion, et cetera, that can impact capacities based on programming.
Okay, can we just, I need to just see if I can get one concrete example. Let's just go with, can we go with Thoreau?
Sure.
Because on the chart that you gave us,
Oops, I'm so sorry, hold on. My bad. Okay,
okay, what I see right now on this chart is the number of students that live in the Thoreau area is the 493.
correct.
Okay, and that matches the gray bar that says 2025.
Yep.
Okay, now, but also on that same chart, if I go across, I see of the 493 students that actually live in the Thoreau area, 371 of them actually attend the school. And then we see that there is a number of students, like 49 of those Thoreau students choose to go to Leopold, which was on this other data chart.
Mhm.
So when I'm looking at this bar graph, how am I understanding? So this is capacity. And how do we take that 371 of the 493 students are not going to, you know what I mean? Like, how do you measure that capacity in? And knowing that, I'm
So,
not sure I understand how to
yeah,
read this
let
graph.
me, Isaac, are you okay if I stand up and walk them through this again and then you chime in? Does that work?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Sure.
so first of all, we start with the capacity, total capacity at Thoreau is 439 if we are at full capacity 100%.
And that was based on the rooms that are
That-
500
correct.
square feet,
Yep.
that are well ventilated, that you can
Exactly.
use for instructional space.
For example, Thoreau
Okay.
has one classroom space that we can't use even though it's 500 square feet based on the configuration made many, many years ago. So you can't even count that classroom. So it's based on the number of usable classrooms.
Yeah.
You get 439.
Okay,
However, this year, if every student, thank you. This year, every student that was appointed to Thoreau in their attendance area attended Thoreau, we would be over capacity. They would have 493 students, which is more than the school can handle under our current attendance areas.
right.
Okay,
But Cindy, we also have data that says not everybody who's
Cor-
appointed to Thoreau
Correct.
is going to Thoreau.
correct. This is resident.
Okay.
This is based on the attendance area where students are appointed to attend. Okay.
Okay,
So I'm just gonna flip for a second. This is our actual enrollment,
okay,
which policies impact this, choice from families impact this. So currently, for Thoreau, this year, based on third Friday count,
yep,
they had 399 students.
yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
So that's the number of students attending them. So one of the things we have to think about that Isaac said is if we start to plan for the future around residential and where students live, we would say we might not have enough space based on our current attendance areas, the way Thoreau
Okay,
students are assigned.
okay,
However, it's working out for us. It shakes out okay because we have policies that say you can internal transfer. We have policies that say dual language immersion. And if you're in this area, you go to Leopold for dual language immersion,
okay,
et cetera. But what we're also seeing on this slide, I'm just going to stick with this slide for enrollment to the work that MGT has done. They're projecting in 5 years that Thoreau, even just based on enrollment, not based on residential, just on enrollment, they're saying Thoreau is slated to increase. And so we're getting close to that number.
okay.
And Cindy, can you stay to top of those solid bars is the 100% capacity.
Yes.
What is our desired
Yeah.
capacity?
Thank you. That's a great question. So the question is, what is our desired capacity? For our schools on the border of the district, around the border, our capacity, we want to see around a 75%. And that's because that's where we're seeing the greatest amount of open enrollment leavers. And it's also where we're seeing some of the development. For all of our other schools within the attendance area, 85% is like the sweet spot of where we would like to see capacity. So to that point, I don't know that we, and I'm gonna go back a slide, sorry, Isaac. I'm gonna go to Shank, for example. If you see Shank instead of Thoreau,
Yeah,
Shank is, their capacity is 421, residential is 482. So we can hold 421 students if we're at 100% capacity, Dr. Goddard's question. And if we were to have every student that is assigned to that attendance area show up at Shank this year, we would have been at 482. That is beyond 100%. Bob probably knows that percent real quick. I don't, because I'm not good at math, but it's more than 100%. And you could see as we continue, based on the growth and everything that's happening in this side of town, the far east, we're seeing that Shank, if every student continues to show up in that attendance area, they will be over capacity, overutilized. And even with
So-
enrollment, I'm just gonna go to this slide to just further make my point. Even with enrollment in the current state under programming with policies, Shank is close to 100%. And so the question is, if we want to be at that 75 to 85% sweet spot for our schools to give them that flexibility to be able to take on more students if families choose to come, we're cutting it close.
mhm.
Does that answer your question? And does that help clarify, Michelle? President Nichols?
Yes, I mean, I think there's a difference between our actual enrollment versus the residents who are pointing to a school. And what I'm imagining is it's like, or at least this is my first time looking at it, you're kind of toggling between the two. Because you have some data that's telling you some families are choosing not to go to the school that they're pointed to.
Mhm.
They're choosing to go elsewhere, and we have policies that allow that. So how confident do we feel about that trend? And then you have, yeah, and then you go back to if everybody were to go to the school that they pointed to, like, what would that mean for the capacity in the school? And it feels like a little bit of a dance, but that's my interpretation, but I appreciate seeing both.
Yeah.
It's just a lot to kind of wrap your head around.
And there's real asymmetry to this as well. Our students do not travel around our city in section groups.
Yeah,
So you might get 3 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 2 might leave.
Yeah.
So I think it's another reason why also we do need to leave some room for capacity because of that.
Isaac, do you want to talk about why you all use residential versus actual enrollment? Kind of, I don't know if that might be helpful for the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And the main reason is, as stated previously, is just we want to make sure we're getting capacity to where the kids actually are. That's the best way to plan efficiently from our experience of 30 years in doing this work. And you were correct to say that there's a dance that we do go back and forth between the enrollment versus residents. And you're seeing it here on this slide as to why we do that as well. But we can't dismiss the enrollment piece as well. But ultimately, policy decisions can be made based upon what capacity you actually have based on where kids are actually at. And if you're planning efficiently, you're taking a look at your resident totals and saying, hey, we have capacity in this community to add special programming where we may not have it based on the way the boundaries are currently configured in other neighborhoods, right? So we take that into account and can't dismiss it. as we know that there are special programs like dual language immersion programs may be at certain facilities and driving enrollment up. So we'll have to treat that boundary a little bit different and make sure there's room for that program to continue on there based upon the current trends there. So that's really why we do that residence-based approach. You're seeing the other things here. Projections reveal true geographic demand, and that's another way of saying what I said, the capacity where the kids actually are. And we've already seen that your resident projections really are just taking a look at where they're actually living and not where they're actually going to school. But we understand by looking at that attendance matrix and these two charts, there's a difference there. And your policy and decisions are what shows up in that attendance matrix, as well as this chart that you're seeing here on the page. So just want to emphasize that point to you. And so that you guys all have that understanding. It's very important for the public as well. Oftentimes, when we get into our first community engagement session, people will point out, hey, your numbers are wrong. The numbers aren't wrong. They're just being presented in a way they're not usually presented on websites. Where we're presenting your resident totals and not your actual enrollment totals. And then we bring them into that process by going over a lot of the analysis that you're looking at. The first community engagement session is pretty heavy when we get really into the data. It's almost overwhelming, but we go into great detail to help them understand the kind of data that is going behind this to support them and making an informed data-driven decision.
Isaac, before we go into the steering committee, which I think is the next slide, can I just share, they have the data set of every individual school, the map, and I just want to orient them to that so they know what they have when they walk away, and then we can talk about it afterwards. Oh, I'm sorry. President Nichols, Ali has her hand.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm going to pause him.
Go ahead, Board Member Muldrow. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I thought we might have been at the point in the conversation where we're asking questions about the entirety of the presentation, because I've had a chance to review it in its entirety, and also my computer went offline for a few minutes. So I was going to ask questions about kind of the last two slides related to the process, involving getting the community involved and what the steering committee looks like. But I guess based on what Cindy just said, we're not in that portion of the presentation.
Correct. We're almost there.
I think we're
Okay.
getting ready to get there.
Before we go into the last part of the presentation, a lot of the data that we have shared is also summarized in your packet individually by each school. So I just wanted to call this out. Each school, you will see the attendance area draw. You will see where they are in terms of capacity, since we just talked about capacities. Over capacity, under capacity based on color range. You will also see both the residential enrollment and the actual enrollment based on programming and policy. And then you will see two charts at the bottom that show you the transfer ins and the transfer out. So it's just another visual by school to be able to see a lot of the data that we talked about at an individual level visually with a map. So you have this for every school, elementary, middle, right? For our schools that have an assigned attendance. Anything else, President Nichols, or we can go back? Okay, I just wanted to make sure, Isaac, that they knew the individual maps were. So I will keep us moving.
Thank you for that. To talk about, actually, I think we skipped a slide here, and this is where we talked about how we've organized the roles and responsibilities of the steering committee process. And I think it's appropriate for Cindy to take the microphone back here to talk about what that looks like. I'll speak quickly towards what MGT is responsible for here, and we're going to continue to supply you with the data that you're seeing now that is going to go into the forecast. Will help you understand and visualize actual scenarios moving forward are going to be supported by this data and information as well. And we go into the level of detail that you've already seen here by understanding what your open enrollment patterns are and where there are actually options for parents and getting understanding of how that impacts the actual scenario in terms of resident versus enrollment count to make sure that we have both accounted for, so that when you actually show up 3-4 years down the line, you still have capacity. And that's why we support our work with an actual forecast that supports the boundary scenario, so that you have staying power with the boundaries and you're not going through what is a difficult and challenging thing to do. Changing boundaries can be highly emotional, and it's not something that should be done lightly, and it shouldn't be something that is done often. And we try to support our clients with that moving forward. So I'm going to turn it back over to Cindy to wrap things up here by talking about how we've structured the redistricting process. And then we have some scenario modeling that we do with our actual software that is proprietary to MGT, that allows us to take a look at even further data. Where we're taking a look at your individual education plan students as well. We'll have an understanding of where they are and what those ratios look like, so we're not upsetting the balance, and we have accommodations made to make sure that they continue to go to their school of need. We'll take a look at the ethnic and racial makeup as well, to make sure that we're not upsetting the balance there and changing things dramatically, and understanding the impacts that this will have on the demographic makeup, free and reduced lunch that may be impacting different areas of the community, and the language issues that not issues, but different languages that are spoken that need to be accounted for, to make sure that we are taking a holistic approach to this, and everyone is included in this process, and the needs of everyone are examined. And so we don't overlook that, and we can have a true understanding of what those impacts are going to be as we take them into consideration. And they fit within this role of guiding principles of all the different things that we want to accomplish for you, in terms of creating neighborhood schools and creating balance in terms of enrollment and resident student populations and capacities. And all these things will compete against one another, but we do our best to provide scenarios that try to take all of it into account, that you will have a clear understanding of what things will look like moving forward with this type of analysis. And that's what you're seeing here, scenarios to the left, and the level of detail and analysis that people are going to be looking at in terms of the demographic piece that goes into this, to help us make sure that we're making informed decisions for all of our community members and stakeholders. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Cindy to talk about the makeup of this process and who's responsible for those different roles, and what community engagement will look like as well.
Thank you, Isaac. Before I come off of this slide, I just want to reiterate what Isaac said. So what you see on this slide is a sample of what the scenario planning actually looks like, and a sample of what the community input is going to see. So how we think about potential recommendations that will eventually come forward to the Board of Education, where we're seeing imbalances or underutilization or overutilization. We start to play around with what changes might look like for our city to account for the 20 years out. And then after we make some changes, as Isaac indicated, the example shows the impact of those changes. Did we overburden a particular group of people? Did we overburden a demographic group? Did we create a school that has higher than we wanted a concentration of students and families from low income backgrounds, et cetera? So we look at all of that information to see what that potential scenario might look like. So that is the work that the community will see in a really big picture idea of some ideas that we want to have the community react to. So let me walk you through what that looks like in real time. Jesse, can you go back to the other slide deck? Okay.
Yes, right here.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Ollie is your hand up here.
Michelle, I think
Ollie, okay, guys, give me a sec.
Y'all, I can wait until until we're at the point where we're asking questions. I can wait for the presentation to be done.
Okay, thanks. I think Cindy, you're going into
Yep.
like the community.
So yeah, I'm gonna talk a little bit about that now. So as Isaac just mentioned, we've outlined the different roles and responsibilities of the stakeholder groups. So he just talked through kind of the responsibility of MGT. MGT takes all that data, looks at all that. MGT doesn't have local context and doesn't have the content expertise that we have here, right? We know a lot more about each one of our communities. So that's where the district comes in, pulling together our subject matter experts, thinking about the guardrails, thinking about what those capacities are, the definition I shared with you earlier, the programming, current programming, potential future programming. Our steering committee are those ambassadors, local experts. We have transportation on there. That steering committee is holding tight to equity and thinking about the decisions in terms of what we might put forth as a scenario and what that means and the impact for equity. And the steering committee is ultimately responsible for putting forth that final set of recommendations to Dr. Gothard. Our community are the primary stakeholders. They are going to provide feedback on our guiding principles, on the current challenges and complexities we have, and around the draft scenarios. So the community is going to give input, and I'll talk through what that looks like on a couple slides. And then you all, the Board of Education, you have two liaisons to the committee, Board Member Pearson and Board Member Castro. You ultimately are the decision makers. We will bring forth recommendations that the board will have to decide upon and or vote on. And also, as part of board policies, you all are the policy experts around some of the decisions that happen with impacts on enrollment. And the board also staying engaged throughout the process, which is why it's important for the board to join us at our community input sessions. So what are the goals of the steering committee? So in addition to everything I just outlined, the goals of the steering committee are really to provide informed, community-grounded input to guide, recommend, and to ensure multiple perspectives are considered. We have a very diverse group, and that group brings both their individual lived experiences, they bring system level experiences, and then also thinking about the community as a whole in terms of what changes may need to be considered and what might not be. They have been digging into this data that you all saw tonight for the last few months. So they've been looking at this data, they've been considering it and starting to think about where we might want to put forth a scenario for the community to react to. And then they're serving as ambassadors for this entire process. This is when the steering committee has met. This is kind of the work they've done to date. They'll have one more session before we go out to the community. And then we'll have additional meetings to refine scenarios after this first round of input. So it's important to note that anything in these community input sessions that is shared is draft. I talk about it like a writing process. We're in the graphic organizer stage. We're in the just draft thinking. No decisions have been made. No final recommendations will be made in this first round. I try to outline it a little better here for when those input sessions happen. It will be the first of many opportunities for the community over the next year. It's a chance to really learn about the work and the data behind the work, similar to what happened tonight. And as important, it is the opportunity for the community to share their perspective to help us build another better draft. We want to hear from the community of what we're showing as ideas, what they like, and also what they don't like or what they think is a bad idea. We want to know both good ideas and bad ideas before we then draft the next. What those sessions are not at this point, we're not sharing anything that's final or near final, and it is not a decision. So we have many first round input sessions. We've been really intentional about thinking about where to host those sessions and how to go about this to get representation from our entire community. So you can see the first week we're holding them at our comprehensive high schools, and we'll also have virtual sessions. Our second week, we're doing a mix between some schools that have lots of things to take into consideration, as well as community centers. The community centers were really intentional based on some of the data and what we're seeing as potential considerations as well. We want to hear from those families. Week 3, so we have approximately 18 sessions. Week 3, we're continuing in the community. So we're doing the north side, we're doing the south side, and we're doing Centro as well. This won't be the only opportunity. We're recording our sessions and we are going to push our recordings out with the survey as well. For people that aren't able to join at all, they can respond through our recordings and it'll be available on our website. So what does this mean? This means that we're still in the drafting phase. You've seen this timeline before, but I'll call your attention to the blue box that says February 26th through January 27th. That is where we are now. Between now and January of next year, we're going to continue to draft scenarios and get input from our community. After this first round of input, we'll take all of that data and the steering committee will look at that and the steering committee will help us craft a new scenario that will go out to the community again in the fall based on the input from May. In the fall, we'll get another round of input and then we will go out to the community a third time and we'll continue to get closer to what we think will be the final set of recommendations that will come to the Board of Education in February of 27. Those recommendations may be some considerations of what we start with in May and may be very different based on what we hear from the community, as well as the conversations we have together in terms of where the board might be really interested in the direction we go. So February of 27 will be where we bring forth a set of recommendations, and that could be multiple recommendations that may take multiple years to implement, but that the first time that we'll bring forth something for decision-making will not be until February of 27. So I'm gonna pause there. This just takes everybody, the community as well as the board, to our website where we've been keeping update information. We have some recordings. We will also have the full report that Isaac was alluding to on our website. It's about 179 pages. The board will get it, and then the community will have it too, where they can have an in-depth look into all of the data that we will be using to make considerations. So Isaac, anything else you want to add before I turn it over to President Nichols for a conversation?
Really look forward to supporting you and your community through this process and supplying you with the proper data to help make an informed decision. I thank you for your time tonight. And if you have any other questions, happy to do that. And I'm sure we'll have more as we move throughout this process. Happy to be a part of the team here to support you.